I'll be talking about the problems Mercedes W15 is having and how they need to solve this problem, because these problems, they're like major blows dealing with the Mercedes as at this moment. I said earlier this season that Mercedes needs to understand this car because they just moved into the new regulations. All those W13, W14 that they did were out of the regulation. They don't even understand what they were trying to do. Yes, they understand the concept they needed to deliver, but they don't understand how to go about it. The only reason Mercedes had 8 championships was because they've had reliability engine. Aside from the engine reliability, on aerodynamics, Mercedes have not been on par with Red Bull or with Ferrari. The only mistake Ferrari had been making is sometimes driver issues, sometimes team issues, and Red Bull, Verstappen had been able to push them to build a sustainable car for him, because over the years, sometimes the engine will blow up, the car will pack up, the gear, the transmission will just give up. Especially 2018-2019 season, they had that issue, but they've been well over it. And in 2021, with their development of aerodynamics, not that they had a better engine than the Mercedes. The Honda engine was not as good as the Mercedes engine, nor is it reliable than the Mercedes engine. But because they were consistent with the aerodynamics and they were consistent in races around that time, they were able to push the Mercedes to the length and to the limit in which they were able to push the Mercedes to. And what happened? They were able to get the best out of the Mercedes. But this season, the Mercedes have come back with a new car and they are still struggling. What are their main struggles this time? 1, the high speed corner. 2, stability at the rear. 3, downforce. 4, porpoising. Those are the major things the Mercedes are suffering this season. And if we look at it, Mercedes have been an innovator. They've brought so many ideas like the DAS, bringing back the Y250 Vortex, the movable suspension, the pull rod at the back that becomes a push rod on their rear suspension. This season, they've done a lot this season. But is it enough to put them in a championship position, or is it enough to make the Mercedes a championship contender? That is where we are. Now, what has the Y250 Vortex done for them, and what is it meant to do? Now, if we remember from 2014 to 2021, most of the front wings were cut immediately after the front nose, and the rest flows over to the tire area on both sides. Now, the space between the front nose and the front wing is what generates the Y250 Vortex. The front wings is meant to give upwash of airflow for the car to create a downforce. So if there's an upwash from the front wing, it flows directly on the car to push the car down. Now, in the middle, they need this Y250 Vortex to also flow cool air down to generate a vortex underneath the floor. This will give the floor the right vortex it needs to suck itself to the ground, because they are called the ground effect cars. And ground effect cars is what I believe Mercedes have not really understood. If you look at the W13 and W14 evolution and looking at what Red Bull had done this season, it has been a great job. They are still saying they are moving podless fully, and they have done a very good job with what Mercedes could not work with. Mercedes came up with some designs at the point in 2023, that's with the W14. They were able to create a huge shoulder on their engine cover at the back. Red Bull RB20 came up with that idea but made it better than the Mercedes. The downwash in which Mercedes made at the back of their W14B last year, the same thing they copied. So this thing is looking like Mercedes don't really understand how to use things they've really brought into play to make their car better. Now, with the high speed corner, what do they need to do to get their high speed corner addressed? What do they need to do? Now, remember, especially on Jeddah track, Hamilton complained a lot about the high speed, especially when he was chasing after Lando Norris in the race. During the qualifying, they noticed, but they thought it would be better in the race. Now, in the race, he complained a lot about that this car on the high speed corners from turn 3 to turn 10, I think, they are losing about 7/10 to McLaren. You can imagine what they will be losing to other teams. Now, George Russell also had the same issue. Whenever he's getting closer to Fernando Alonso, before you know, he loses out. He gets closer, he loses out. He gets closer, he loses out. So what is really happening? I believe it's still an aerodynamic problem, and that aerodynamic problem has to also do with the rear of the car. Now, we are taking the high speed and the stability together. If they are having issues with the rear of the car on those high speed corners, when the cars are turning, they are losing balance. Unlike every other car on the grid, the Mercedes cars are losing balance. They are tipping off on high speed. Whenever they are cornering on high speed, they are tipping off the rear, which creates an instability in the car. So the driver at the point who want to slow down the car also get the rear balance so that it won't tip off or run the car into the wall. So all these, they are giving them low speed. No matter how they push or how they force the car to generate the speed on those high speed corners, because of the rear and they don't want to destroy the car, they will have to slow down. And slowing down will make them lose tenths to the cars ahead and the cars behind them. Now, what do they need to do to stabilize the rear? One of the things they need to do is, number one, there should be a counterbalance in front because they have loads of load at the rear. By the time the car arrives on the corner, it tips off because the front has no load. So they need to build something like a counterbalance in the front to give them enough stability at the rear. Then the way the pull rod is arranged to give it a push rod, I think they need to look at that especially. Those are the things they can do before the next race in Australia. These are the things they can quickly do because they are going to another high-speed circuit, because the Australia Grand Prix in Albert Park is an hybrid track. And what does this hybrid track do? It has both the street circuit and the normal racing circuit formation. So that's why it's an hybrid track. So there will be so many speed corners on Albert track in which they need to overcome. So if their car is still not being able to maneuver the high speed, or Mercedes are unable to solve that problem before coming to Albert Park, they would have these same challenges in Albert Park. So they need to solve the rear and build a counterbalance. And also they need to look at their aerodynamics because they ran a low downforce wing right there. They need to look at it. Is that the right thing they are meant to do? Do they have the right beam wing? Like the Ferrari, they had to remove one of the beam wing in Jeddah. Instead of using two, they used one, which helped them. I think Red Bull also did the same. They used one. So Mercedes need to also understand when to compromise and how to compromise. Now, if they don't know when to compromise and how to compromise, it will really affect what they are doing. Now to downforce. I am sure and I can tell you, Mercedes still don't understand that this ground effect car, the majority of the aerodynamic or the downforce they need, 80% of it comes from the floor. And that shows in 2022 season when we have Williams having the top speed on straight line. And you know what Red Bull did? They copied the Williams floor in 2023 on the RB19, and that gave them a championship winning car. That floor alone gave the Red Bull the winning formula they needed. And I think they've really understood. If you look at all those teams, Red Bull have really understood the ground effect cars. They understood it to a point that they knew they cannot develop the RB19 more. So they changed the whole concept to what Mercedes started. They rejuvenated this concept and they made it better. And now that's the same concept they are going into in 2025 when the whole technical regulations will be changing for 2026. So with this, you understand that Red Bull really understood this. 2023 season, Ferrari brought a new floor because they understood that they failed that in 2022. And looking at the upgrade McLaren brought in 2023, the floor was one of the major things they brought. So the floor has a lot to do with the ground effect car. So the Mercedes team needs to look at what they need to do to generate the downforce. And the floor is one of the major things. They need to find a floor that complements the design that they have. The floor that can generate the right vortices, suck the car into the ground when the car is moving so it can be closer to the ground and also give the right downforce effect it needs, generate the speed, especially on the straight and also on the corner. Now, the upper part of the floor needs to be designed in a way or in a form in which on corners it will also keep a balance with the car. The lower part of the floor will do its job. The upper part of the floor also has to do its job. If it's not doing its job, then I think they will be failing in that aspect also, which also takes us to porpoising, which was one of the problems Mercedes had in Jeddah. The car was bouncing, which also goes back to the floor. They still need to build a floor that is right. Looking at all these teams, some people will say, yeah, maybe it's the Y250, whatever they designed. I don't think it is. They need to design a floor that complements it. Now, if you look at 2020, Mercedes had the best car on the grid. They broke almost everything. Not just the best engine, they had the best car. And I believe they didn't develop that car in 2021. It was still the same car because they won everything, almost everything in 2020. Now, coming in 2021, they just made a little development and everybody caught up with them. So what do they need to do? That car is still one of the fastest cars in Formula 1 till today. They need to look at that, look into that direction. What did they do right? What did they get wrong? Now, how can they make this floor or ground effect era better for themselves and not fail themselves also in this era? Because as it is, Mercedes are failing and it looks like they have failed totally. Because if they can't win races this season, that makes it about over 40 races with just one win for Mercedes since 2020. 2022. They know they are doing a lot of things wrong, so they need to get it right. Because most people are looking at Lewis Hamilton that is changing a lot of setup, he's not jiving with the team, maybe because he has left for Ferrari. I can tell you, I said in one of my podcasts last season that I think Lewis Hamilton already knew that the W15 will not be a car that will perform, and they will still need to learn a lot. That was why he signed for Ferrari, because the 2026 season, it makes sense if he moves in 2025 so that he can help building 2026 car that will suit him and that will suit him and they can win with. Because Mercedes had looked like a team drunk with success. They don't want to understand what they need to do to succeed again. So when a team is so drunk with success that for them to move forward, it becomes a challenge. This is what I think is happening, because they've succeeded for 8 to 10 years. Now to move forward, problem for them. Because in 2022, he told them about the design that will suit it, but they didn't come up with that design. Coming in 2023, they came up with something even worse. That was backward. They had to bring a new car in 2023. But in 2022, I remember Lewis Hamilton used this car as the experimental rat, because he was changing setup, doing a lot of things for them to learn, design a 2023 car. But you know what they still do? They came up with a worst car in 2023. So he's doing the same thing for them. He knows he's leaving 2025. He has nothing to lose. He may and he may not win a race. All those things Toto Wolff was saying at the beginning of the season, that they are hoping to win races and this. This guy is looking like a car that cannot win anything until they bring better and bigger upgrades that would fight. And bigger upgrades that they are bringing that will fight will be upgrades that will fight not just Ferrari, because they cannot even fight the Ferraris presently. They are still in the leagues of the McLaren and the Aston Martin, and possibly us. So Mercedes need to think about what they are doing. They need to bring upgrades. So if they are bringing any upgrade to Albert Park, they should be bringing upgrades that will just give them the right balance, the right stability, and give a counterbalance front to the rear. If they are bringing upgrades on the floor, they are wasting money, because they need to learn. Coming to Imola, I believe they will be bringing bigger upgrades that would move the car forward. But with the bigger upgrades be able to move the car forward when the Red Bull team would have shifted the goalpost again, because the Red Bull team has shifted the goalpost from last season to a new goalpost this season. Now by Japan, they are saying they will shift the goalpost again, or in Imola. So will the Mercedes team be able to move up with them? Now we can see Ferrari are so close to the Red Bull on one lap pace, even better than in 2022, that they had a success. But here, will they be able to compete? Now they said this car is a very good car, it's stable, it's better than the last 2 years car that they've done. And remember, Ferrari has been learning, because they were on the right path with the car from 2022. Now they are saying they are bringing upgrades to learn to make the car better. They are bringing upgrades that will take the car closer to Red Bull. So if Ferrari team are looking to get closer to Red Bull and Mercedes team are far away from even Ferrari, they need to do a good job. And doing a good job, Lewis Hamilton is helping them to do that job by trading his car, trading his own success for the team's success, and to keep a relationship with Toto Wolff like he had kept. So I think with all these things, if Mercedes can come up with a car that will be able to challenge, a good car that will be able to give them the right delivery, the right things they need, it will be a win-win for Mercedes. But will they be able to win a race this season? I doubt it, except to come back from the middle of the season and we see them doing a great job. But for now, I don't see Mercedes getting close. McLaren are bringing upgrades to compensate for their downforce issue and also their straight line speed issue, in which they had in Jeddah and in Bahrain. They're bringing upgrades in Albert Park. They might even be far away from Mercedes. So Mercedes need to do something that would complement what they really need to achieve. But if they're not doing that, 2024 is a wasted season for Mercedes, and 2025, well, they should just gear up for 2026, because they've lost 4 good years achieving nothing. And that is where I will stop. I'll meet you guys in Albert Park when we'll see what upgrades they are bringing, or any team up, and how these teams can do well to survive and to do well to challenge Red Bull this season. But from the look of things, most people are already getting tired of listening to the Dutch anthem. Guys, we can't get tired. Red Bull have done a great job in factory and on track. But if all these teams can do a better job, we might just see things change in the next 7 races. But up until Albert Park, I love you guys. Thank you. Bye. Cheers.